President Donald Trump mans the phone speaking to a series of world leaders. We are seeing the real results of his latest executive action. Some international travellers are experiencing confusion and delays. Mr. Trump ordered a temporary ban Friday on all refugees and suspended immigration from 7 predominantly Muslim nations, including Syria. Iran is pushing back against that order. Its foreign ministry says it will ban US citizens in response. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has been on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He spoke earlier to the leaders of Japan and Germany. We are covering the response to that executive action on immigration from all angles. Firstly, we're joined by international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson. Nick, this executive order is a sweeping policy upending decades of US policy on immigration and refugees, and we are seeing immediate ramifications.
There are. We're seeing at the airport in New York, for example, 12 people detained there. That's from Congressman Jerry Nader, who's visiting there, trying to visit 2 of the Iraqis who were detained there, though we now understand one of those 2 Iraqis detained has now been allowed to leave the airport. Those are the early reports that we're getting from associates who are with the congressman there at the airport. But there are implications, obviously, when for people checking in at airlines all around the world. We've heard from Cairo where airport officials there have had to turn people away from getting on planes. We've heard from Qatar Airlines. We've heard from the Emirati airline as well, Emirates airline. So they're all saying that they're dealing with this, that it's only affecting a small number of people. But of course, the details are quite complex. And what has emerged here is that anyone who arrived in the United States after the president signed off on that order has in effect the terms appear to have changed in part while they've been in the air, although of course that's up for question now as well. I mean, an hour ago that seemed clear, but now we understand that one of the Iraqis who were detained at the airport in New York has been released. So I think what we're seeing here is lawyers working through the implications of this, as well as border officials. But this goes way beyond the short-term implications for those who were in travel, expecting to travel in the next few days. We've heard from the Dutch politician Geert Wilders saying that he thinks that the United States, President Trump should ban more, and these are his words, more Muslim countries, and he talks about Saudi Arabia. The implications of these travel restrictions as they're appearing now enables populist nationalist politicians in Europe at a time when there's a great sensitivity to the direction that President Trump is going in, and also hearing now from Iran reciprocal action on Americans wanting to travel to Iran. This, of course, and I raise that one right now because this, of course, just when President Trump has been speaking with President Putin. President Trump, and this is where it all gets complicated. President Trump has said that he wants to partner with Russia to tackle ISIS. Well, to do that in Syria automatically means, therefore, the implication would be if you partner with Russia there against ISIS, you're partnering with Iran, that you're partnering with President Assad. The ground is shifting by the minute. As that phone conversation was going on, that's when we were hearing from the Iranians. That complicates even what might appear to be a simple issue of talking to Russia about tackling ISIS. Suddenly, a development springs into play from a separate action on the immigration.
Yeah, it is certainly very complicated and fast-moving, as you mentioned, not only affecting government relations and individuals, but also companies. I understand even Google is putting out warnings to their employees about people that may be affected by this.
For any global organization that has people who work for them and travel for them from those 7 affected countries, there are immediate implications. And Google's directive has been for those people who may be affected, and if you are planning to travel to the US, don't travel. Sit tight. So immediately this is having an impact. And it's not clear, quite how these hurdles will be overcome in the short term for global businesses. But the impact of all the things that President Trump has done in office this week are unsettling for business. The situation with Mexico, over the wall. Companies now, global companies, are looking at their supply chains. How are their supply chains going to be affected by the shifting sands, the swiftly shifting sands of trade around the globe that President Trump is moving into action?
And of course, there are some lawsuits already underway, many calling Mr. Trump's executive order unconstitutional.
They are, and certainly that's what's being applied here, the legal approach that's being applied in part at the airport in New York. The legal action that was taken around those 2 Iraqis that we know about that were detained. However, in the last half an hour or so, it does appear that one of those detained there has been released. That's according to an associate of Jerry Nader, the congressman who went to the airport to meet with the 2 Iraqis, that one of them, Hamid Darwish, has in fact been released. But again, we don't know the details legally of why he alone of the 2 was released. Lawyers are still working through this and still challenging it, and of course they have to challenge it quickly, because the implication for these people who are being stopped at airports arriving in the United States when they think they have valid visas, the implication is they will be turned around and put on a plane back home, which may put their lives in danger or their relatives' lives in danger as well.
And my understanding of the person that has been released from JFK worked for the US government for over a decade in Iraq as an interpreter. So no doubt a lot of people that have worked with the US in various war zones, whether it be Iraq or Syria, will be affected by this.
The implications for wherever the United States may pitch up next, and where it is already in Iraq, for forces on the ground there, and in Syria too. There will be in Syria, where there are US special forces, local people who are working with them, be they parts of militias or any other designation. And they may be laying their lives potentially on the line for US forces, as we've seen in Iraq, as we've seen in Afghanistan. And so when somebody considers whether or not they'll do that, they do it out of their own national interests, their own family interests, their own self-interest. But there's always that interest of doing it in partnership with the United States, and therefore the idea that you would have support, that this would be looked upon kindly in some way. And it potentially diminishes in the future the United States being able to find willing and able partners on the ground. It doesn't eradicate it, but it just changes the complexion with which people will look at it. Having said that, even in the past number of years, for some of those who've fought alongside US forces, helped US forces put their lives on the line, Iraq, Afghanistan, and we've seen it in Britain too, they haven't been getting the ready visa permission to come to those countries. So that's been a concern already, but this will escalate that concern. And potentially as well, this is something that we'll see ISIS likely take propaganda out of as well, that they will try to say the United States isn't really going to support you, the United States is against Muslims, to rally people to their cause, if you will. At many levels, the implications here in the Middle East right now has strong implications, but also the concerns, as I was saying, about Europe and how that affects the way that Europe views the United States as being a destabilizing force, enabling nationalist politicians in Europe.
Yeah, huge ramifications and a very quickly moving story. Nick Robertson, great to have your analysis on all of that.